Hey, welcome back to the shop. Today on Honest Tool Reviews, I have a different one for you. And if you're watching this, you probably don't know Honest Tool Reviews. If you're watching this, you were probably looking for a water pump and ended up on this video, in which case I apologize. You're going through this shit show. But hopefully I can give you a little bit of advice. Maybe you do need it, maybe you don't need it. How many water pumps have I done in the past? I've done 6. How many of them have required this process? Every one of them. How many times have I heard people say otherwise? Every damn time I talk to someone about it. So I want to show you a process you may have to do, because when I was 16 and 17, I didn't know a damn thing about mechanics, and I started learning. And there were people that said, you just take the water pump and put it on. That's not the case here. And then when you confront people about it, they have no clue what you're talking about. It's because of their water pump that they've been doing with their vehicle and not yours. That's why your water pump is different. My water pump is different than theirs, and it's why they're not correct. Some water pumps come like this. I imagine close to all of them come like this now, because it's a lazy, poor excuse to not have to do anything extra. What do I mean by that? Well, there's supposed to be a gasket right here, and they don't install it from the factory. Why wouldn't they install it from the factory, you say? I don't know. They had it. They had the 2 pieces and just didn't do it. Interestingly enough, they got a picture of a radiator and a forward-facing motor, which does not help me because I have a sideways-facing motor. What you're supposed to do when you get a water pump in this position is you take whatever make and model it is. You take the water pump. You always read the instructions, because you're not doing Legos this time around. You can't really afford to mess up. It costs money. When these things start to cost money, that's when you start to pay attention. And when they start to pay attention, you read the instructions. Now, these instructions just stereotypically show you installing it. They want you to clean the gasket material from the pump mounting surface and all of that stuff, but you should read it anyway, just in case your make and model has a variancy. Now, something else that you have to have during the process that I have to do, and you probably do too because you're here Googling, yes, you have to go out and buy something else, because they didn't want to do it themselves. And you could argue, well, it saves them money, so it saves you money. But not if you have to turn around and pay extra taxes and do it yourself and fuck it up and buy a whole nother one. That's what this is probably about. No. Before I install this, I want to express very heavily that this is what I'm using. I don't know what kind of gasket or seal you may receive. You should never take that kind of advice from the internet. Permatex is really good. This is a water pump and, I can't read it from behind, and thermostat housing gasket maker. Now, this is good for water pumps, water pump seals. It's a gasket maker. Technically, you would argue this is a gasket. That's a gasket maker. If you put that on, you don't need this. But this came with it. We're going to put this on. This goo, this sealant, is to hold the gasket in place while you're installing it, so that it doesn't fall or wiggle around. Because if you bolt this in to a surface, these surfaces are going to be flat and mashed together. And if for any reason this drops, you're going to mash it like a sum. And when you do, all of this down here that gets smashed is going to be useless, and the top up there is no longer going to be good either. You're going to have to buy a whole nother housing. Now, you could argue that you could just use this, but I don't know anyone that's ever done it. And I don't see anyone saying that you should. And I don't see anywhere on this water pump and thermostat housing gasket maker where it says throw away your gasket and just use this product. So I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to show it to you. Now, you can do what you want, but this is just what I'm doing. So first off, you should probably wear gloves if you have some. I don't appear to have any. So, because this stuff is pretty nasty and I have dogs around, I am going to improvise. Not because I'm scared of the goo, but because I want to contain any excess. If I have it on my hands and my dog licks my hands later, that might not be too good for the dog. Okay. So I'm going to take this relatively clean, as in it's not dirty at all. Maybe not sanitary, but relatively clean plastic bag. I'm going to put it over my hand when applying. Okay, so I'm just going to put it there to be ready because I don't have gloves. Okay, I'm going to read the instructions real quick. Let dry for 1 hour. Okay, so now I know I need 1 hour from right now. Oh, and it starts to come out already. Probably because I mashed the back end of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and just go all the way around with it, nice and slow. I am actually going to turn the housing. Okay. And then go back because I saw where I didn't apply as much in places. Okay, there was a pocket of air in there. They sold me air. A lot of air. Quite a bit of that was air. Relatively half the tube was air. Okay, now before I use that itty bitty bit that's left, I want to make sure I have to use it. Because I really just need to fill in that area and then push this gasket down. I don't need to make an entire gasket. But I do have to make sure that I manage to get it in the crevices correctly. So I'm going to do this. Just very gently go all the way around. Just like this. I see that spot turned out to be a hole. So now I'm pushing back this way. Just like this. Okay. Now for the hard part, because I spent my money on this. I'm going to turn this inside out. Grab this again, and I'm going to flatten it. I didn't just get it even, I'm going to flatten it and take off all of that excess that is unnecessary that I mistakenly put in. Okay. Now that does hurt. That hurts because that's money, but that's about it, and it'll be okay. I'm a big boy. Now imagine if you're working on this, you're a big boy or girl yourself. So, mistakes get made, and we deal with them. Now, some of y'all are probably just overlooking me, but some of y'all are actually very observant, and you're wondering, what do you mean mistakes are made? Well, if you keep the tube and you didn't use all of it, it says thermostat and water pump. Well, what do I mean by it says thermostat and water pump. Well, I mean exactly what I just said. The paper here says thermostat and water pump. So if you keep this tube and didn't use all of it like I just did, you won't have to go buy another tube when you do your thermostat. Now, why would I save it for the thermostat? Here's a little bit of advice for anybody who's just now doing their water pump. And your situation may be different, but my vehicle has 190,000 miles on it, and it was a government van. And I have found the need to do the water pump. The water pump has started weeping, otherwise known as crying. And with this crying, it needs to be fixed. Well, it needs to be fixed because something's wrong with it. And that something that's wrong with it could just be wear and tear. Could also be deterioration, which is kind of like wear and tear, but caused by, you know, the quality of the coolant and other little factors like that. So I don't know why it failed. I'm not a professional engineer, I'm just a mechanic, and people seem to like to remind me of that. So here I am, just being a mechanic. And because I don't know what's wrong in the Department of Water Pumps, I do know I have the original thermostat on my vehicle. Well, I'm still talking, you still haven't heard the point, but you might have gotten the point. If you have the original parts on your vehicle, and one of them has started to go out, and the other original parts are in line with this part, just in case, it might be a good idea to change multiple parts. So if, let's just say I have a radiator, and I've done a radiator flush kit on it 2 or 3 times in its life just to keep it up, and now the water pump has gone out. Well, is it possible when I did the flushes they weren't perfect? Yes, I'm human. I make mistakes. And, you know, the purpose of doing a flush is to kind of help make everything last longer. And this is the first thing that has failed on my vehicle in the line of the water pump and all. The hoses seem to be in good shape and all of that mess. And when I do drain it, I get some crud out of it. But there is crud. So, could the crud have caused the water pump to go bad? Well, until I've pulled the water pump, I really can't tell what condition the inside is in. However, I can tell you from the outside that the thermostat for my vehicle was less than $12, and the safety and peace of mind of knowing that the motor hasn't blown up because it's actively cooling itself appropriately makes me sleep better at night. I only have one vehicle at the moment it needs to run. So, that overly long-standing bit of advice is to make that tube last a little bit so you can put a little bit around the thermostat. Now, as far as I know, thermostats already have a ring on them. So why do I suggest using that? Well, for pretty much the exact same reason that you put it on the water pump. To hold this gasket in place while you're installing it, when you put a water pump in, a thermostat in, a lot of times you're putting the thermostat in with the long part out. I've seen it. I had a Mustang like that. The one that I took off was that way. The one I put back on was the same way the one I took off was. And the heaviness wanted to fall out of the hole. And now I was young, I was miserably broke, and I was desperate. I could not figure out how to get that thing to stay. Well, I put the parts on, the housing on the back side, you know, to the motor. I put toothpaste on there, and that did it. And I imagine the toothpaste deteriorated away once everything was on and the heat got going and it flushed it out, like, you know, just kind of like brushing your teeth. It does go away. But the gasket maker works. And if you have some, you don't have to do any weird jerry rigging that you have to feel bad about later. I still feel bad about that to this day, and that Mustang's been in the junkyard for probably years now. So, my point being, if I didn't waste so much, I wouldn't have to spend any more money to feel like a real mechanic. So because it's not something just on a shelf at a mechanic shop or at a factory that I work at, I actually have to conserve a little bit, and that's a little lesson here. I made a mistake, and a little lesson is to try to be conservative about the parts and supplies that we have. And I know people nowadays, they throw a fit when they hear the word conservative, conservant, all of that, because they don't want to be part of the right. But, you know, I'm part of the right, and I don't think I'm a bad guy. So the instructions for this gasket maker said, let it dry for an hour. Now, for an hour to be torqued to its torque specifications. Now, I looked, though, before I, came out here to do this video, and it doesn't actually have a torque specifications for it. It has torque specifications for this. And this is about 12 to 13 torque pounds squared on the Dodge Caravan of my make and year, 07 3.3 liter. Now, that may not be your torque specs, but it's mine. So I'm going to let this sit and dry, and it just needs to sit somewhere out of the way. So I'm going to let it sit like this, sticking out of the box. It's not closed, but it's in the box. It can't rock back and forth or move. It's not going to roll. I'm try to clean my hands up a little bit because I managed to get some on there anyway. That's a process that needs to be done to a water pump. If you have pulled out the box and you just have this O-ring gasket just sitting there stupidly staring you in the face. Now, I want to say this before people start commenting, because they're going to comment and they're stupid as shit, and they need to go ahead and have this told to them, because if we don't tell them, they won't know. There's no way for them to inference this. But this advice is for young up-and-coming mechanics that need to know this because they don't know this. If you're a 55-year-old mechanic or a 25-year-old mechanic and you've taken 5 or 6 courses and you think you're the cock of the walk and you've done all your mechanic work for the last 10, 15 years and you got a full fleet of tools and you don't give a damn, you shouldn't be on my page in the first place. So there's no need to do this stupid bullshit trolling saying, this was a waste of time, or I already knew this. It's great to know if you don't know. And a lot of things you don't know. And with women breaking up with the men they've chosen to breed with so much nowadays, the fathers just aren't there. They can't be. They're not allowed to be. The choices aren't always theirs. And whether or not you had a father in your life, he may not have been mechanically knowledgeable. He may have been like a lawyer or a doctor or anything else in the world. And that's great if he needs to do open heart surgery on you, he legally can't. And that's great if he's a lawyer and he can get you out of jail, which he legally isn't supposed to. But neither of those things can help you, get your car back and running. And so if you're like me and you didn't have the best upbringing for whatever reason, follow me for more tips and tricks. This may be just the thing that you were wondering about and did not know. There's tons of videos about tools where I've given them a rating. I have a few that I have hated and a whole lot that I've liked. So if you're looking to buy tools, take a look at some of these things and just see if it's something that you don't have in your toolbox yet and if you may need to consider buying one. Along with that, let me know how this goes for you in the comments below. And true to my my little YouTube channel that I'm doing here, I want to make sure to remind you to stay safe out there. Have a great day. Bye.